Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of Progress Update 5. This video is a bit later than I expected, and I apologize for that. Some personal issues popped up right after part 1 released that I had to deal with, so work went a bit slower than I had hoped it would at first. Plus, the stuff I did add just straight up took longer than I expected it to. In any case though, we've got quite a bit to cover today, so let's hop right in. Like I've mentioned on the blog, the problem that really delayed Progress Update 5 in general was Catboy's model becoming corrupted. Essentially what happened is that I tried to add some rotation bones to fix issues with his wrists, and that caused his entire rig to become extremely just inaccurate when it came to where the bones were. And thanks to Blender's extremely small undo queue, once I realized what had happened, I couldn't fix it without redoing the animations pretty much completely from scratch. At the same time, even the normal base rig was having problems with Catboy's model, with strange joints and bizarre stretching all over the place. Between that and the overly high poly count on the model, I decided to just completely remake the model and then tweak the rig from there. So, the good news is that the end result actually looks very good. As you can see here, Catboy's anatomy is a bit more realistic and much more visibly pleasing in general. Furthermore, his animations have all been tweaked a bit in order to work with the new model, with some general improvements to fluidity here and there. They're still not in a completely finished state, but generally his movements make a little bit more sense now. And the change that I'm the most excited about is that Catboy now has an actual mouth, enabling him to actually express his emotions throughout the game, whether he's happy, whether he's sad, hurt, angry, etc, etc. You can see them all here. The coolest thing is that this new model, despite all these new features and all this new definition, is actually twice as performance friendly as the old one. Well, almost. The actual stats are on the screen there, but it still looks like 10 times better all around. While we're on the topic of visual improvements, I've also added a slight mirage effect to Catboy's dodges. The mirage emanates when Catboy has iframes and quickly disperses when he doesn't, to help show the player when exactly they're vulnerable. I was originally hoping to make him partially transparent when dodging, but unfortunately there wasn't really a good way for me to do this without having his eyes look very strange and stand out way too much when he did go transparent when he was dodging, so I just decided to take this different route, which gets the same point across. Catboy's model isn't the only visual element that's been improved, however. As you've probably noticed by now, I've also improved the UI quite a bit as well. The hearts up there in the top left have been updated from the placeholder 8-bit form they were in before, and I've also added an ammo counter up there in the top right. On top of these miscellaneous visual improvements, I've also added a bunch of sounds, like you've probably noticed at this point. There's a couple more throughout the video, but they're mostly just here to be a proof of concept that my sound effect system works, which, good news is, it does. So, there you go. One last general improvement I've made is to the first-person mode. First-person mode is now in an almost completely playable state, featuring really nice transitions between it and normal third-person mode. Most importantly, however, Catboy's model now rotates along with the camera when you're in first-person. Though there are still visual glitches here and there, first-person is now usable for those looking for the vintage Fantabuloso game experience, or just those who want to aim the ball a little bit better. Now let's dive into the real meat of this update, the combat. First and foremost, the player has actual hitboxes on melee attacks, allowing them to deal damage both up close and from afar. When the player uses a light attack, the game will pick from one of 3 animations to play. Although these animations all look different, they all have the same frame data and are just there to add variety to the combat. Functionally, they're the exact same, but they all look different, which just makes you feel a little bit better when you're fighting things. Another major feature is that both the player and the enemies can now cause and receive knockback, governed by a stat called Fortitude. If you want, I can explain it more in depth on the blog later, but essentially what Fortitude is it's just a character's resistance to knockback. The basic gist is that every attack has a stagger damage value in addition to its normal damage value. This stagger damage affects a character's Fortitude health. Once something's Fortitude health is drained, it regenerates back to a certain point based on how much knockback they take, and then knockback itself is actually applied. So, to demonstrate with some actual data, this Shamrock Cannoneer here has a Fortitude stat of 16. However, Catboy's punches each deal 15 stagger, which means that the Cannoneer will then be locked, or stunned rather, within 2 hits. After those 2 hits, however, its Fortitude will not be able to regenerate back to max if Catboy keeps swinging, which means that then Catboy will then stun it on every single attack, stun locking it to death in a 1v1 scenario. Catboy himself will not have any fortitude at the beginning of the game, so he'll get stunned or knocked back from any attack. However, as he upgrades his health, he'll also get fortitude along with the health upgrades, meaning that if he wants to build up his tankiness health-wise, he's also able to build it up stagger resistance-wise as well. While we're talking about attacks, let's discuss the changes I've made to Catboy's ranged option. Ranged attacks will now work off of an ammo system, with ammo pickups being scattered throughout the level and possibly dropped by enemies as well. I haven't quite decided yet. By default, the ammo maximum will be 10, but an upgrade tree will exist to increase this limit, as well as add extra ammo from ammo pickups, and at the highest level, add in ammo regeneration. Ammo pickup graphics are currently placeholder, don't worry, they're not just going to be these weird smoky spheres in the end, but their functionality is perfectly intact. There's also a system to make their ammo value vary based on the type, so I could have a small ammo pickup only grant 5 ammo, while I could have a really big one grant a full ammo recovery. One final thing I'd like to say about ranged attacking is that I've decreased Catboy's movement speed slightly more when he's aiming. This is because even with his slower speed and the Shamrock's increased speed, it was still way too easy to just kite them around while charging up your shots. This way there's a bit more risk to make up for the pretty large amount of reward you get from having a really powerful ranged attack. The last thing I'd like to talk about regarding combat mechanics is slipstancing. I've mentioned it before, but essentially what slipstancing is a mechanic similar to a parry. When Catboy dodges without inputting a direction, there's an extremely brief window of time where he'll have invulnerability frames. If he gets hit by an attack during these iframes, he'll be granted the slip stance buff, which multiplies his outgoing damage and stagger damage by 1.2 for the next 3 seconds. In addition to this, the buff will stack multiplicatively, meaning that you can then chain slip stances and deliver devastating blows if you time it so that the buffs overlap. Slipstancing will also be upgradable via the skill tree, improving statistical elements like the duration or the damage, or adding additional iframes or AoE knockback upon successful slipstance activation. On top of all these brand new mechanics, I've done a lot of low-key bug fixing as well. A major issue causing the player to move the wrong direction if they move the camera around too much has been resolved. Shamrock AI has been slightly tweaked and improved. Music looping has been rewritten entirely to be more stable and efficient. And lock-on has been greatly improved to the point where it's completely usable. Though it still has some issues with accuracy and being able to lock onto things through walls, etc., I'm very happy with where it's at right now as a sort of beta lock-on. One final topic I'd like to discuss is where I'm planning on going with the future of the Fantabuloso game in general. I recently made a post on the blog about this, which I'll link in the description below, but here's a quick summary. By the end of August, I'm aiming to have a public demo out for the game, featuring a portion of Cragwell Woods, the brand new and improved Sphere Friend Fighty Place, and possibly the Sphere Friend City as well, if I have the time. Assuming that the demo is out on time and is also, more importantly, well received, I'm also aiming to do a Kickstarter shortly after it releases. The goal will be somewhere around 15k, with the money being used to both pay the musician that I'm hiring, and to cover my living expenses for the time it takes me to make the game. I'd also like to take this moment to mention that there are probably going to be a couple things missing in the base game that I've discussed as potential features before. The main thing is that the Fantabuloso will not be making it in as an alternate hub world like I discussed previously. Instead, I'm going to be having the secret areas that are sort of Super Mario Sunshine inspired be within the Fantabuloso. So you go through a portal and you end up in some branch of the Fantabuloso, which you then go through and you get the sausage and then you leave. On top of that change, I'm also thinking that multiple weapons will probably not make it in. Mostly because that would be a lot of development overhead, mostly through the animation required. I'd have to reanimate all these different movements of Catboy for each individual weapon, which would be a huge pain, and the main thing is it would add a lot of development time for a feature that would be relatively unnecessary for a platformer. Now, I'm not saying for sure that neither of these are going to get in. It's possible that they could come back as maybe stretch goals for the Kickstarter or something. We'll see. I'll have to, plan out my schedule and my potential budget, etc. But, yeah, don't lose hope, but also don't hold your breath if you've been looking forward to those two. So, that just about sums it up for this progress update. Due to the work required to get the demo out in a timely fashion, I'm probably not going to be making too much more content here on YouTube until its release. However, I am going to go back to my midweek updates that I've been doing for the past month or so, up until Progress Update 5 became such a shit show, if you pardon the French. So you can go and subscribe to my blog by clicking that link on the screen right there to stay up to date with those midweek updates. Or if you want to subscribe to me here on YouTube just in case, that's completely okay too. Or both. You know, that's probably the best way to keep up to date with the game. And as always, if you want to share this game with your friends, that would be an amazing thing to do. If you know anyone who'd be interested in a 3D platformer that also has some pretty unique things going for it, send them my way. Thank you guys, and I'll see you all next time. Adios.